Morning arrived the color of old tin. A thin line of light climbed the far ridge and failed to warm the frost clinging to the bunch grass. Thomas Morgan stood on his porch with a coffee cooling in his hands and watched the land make its slow introductions to the day. The wind was a rumor from the north. The creek spoke low. Somewhere beyond the cottonwoods, a hawk unstitched the quiet and stitched it back again. He should have been saddling Arrow. Arrow was the kind of gelding you don't get twice in a lifetime. Coal black except for a small star on his forehead. A stride that felt like a promise kept. A mind that met a man halfway. He carried Thomas through calving seasons and heat waves and the small, unremarkable distances that make a life. The saddle fit him the way certain names fit certain mouths, without asking permission. But Arrow was not in his pen. He was 50 miles west, tied to a juniper post at an old line camp on the far side of Hatcher Ridge. 2 days earlier, the world had chosen to demonstrate how it could rearrange a man's plans without breaking a sweat. The truck snapped an axle 10 miles shy of the line camp. The spare tire wouldn't matter to a broken axle, and the radio sputtered once and decided to be a paperweight. Thomas had led Arrow the last miles on foot and left him with hay, water, and a shaded post while he hiked to the highway to flag a ride back to town. He meant to borrow a flatbed and return that afternoon. Then the storm came down off the mountains like a decision. The road washed out beneath mile marker 91, a long bite taken right out of the shoulder in the lane, as if the earth had been hungry for a change. No one was getting through with a trailer for at least 2 days, maybe 4. A deputy on the scene shook his head over the gap and said words like closure and hazard and liability. Men in neon vests measured the hole as if measurement could turn it into a different shape. A piece of the mountain kept falling in slow, thoughtful slumps, as if persuaded by gravity's patient theology. "You can't get there in a truck," the deputy said. "We'll open a detour when the graders have their say." Thomas looked past the man to the ridge line, to the seam of gray clouds still dissolving into blue. He counted distances in his head the way you count breaths when the pain tries to argue. Hatcher Ridge by road was 50 miles. By memory and boot leather, it was a little less. You cut across the burned draw. You follow the old fence row that nobody fixed because nobody owned it anymore. You drop into Owl Canyon and come up the back of the line camp like something that belonged to the land more than the road. "You can't tell a horse you'll be there in 4 days," Thomas said. "He knows the size of a day. You going to walk it?" The deputy asked, not unkindly, but with the incredulity of a man who had forgotten it was an option. "I'm going to go get him," Thomas said. He packed without fuss. A canvas roll with a wool blanket, a tin cup, a handful of jerky, 2 apples he kept not for himself, a length of soft rope, a canteen he filled twice, matches, though he expected no fire. The wind had opinions and the grass remembered last summer's lesson. He wrote a note and pinned it to the ranch gate for the neighbor. "Road's gone. Arrow's up at Hatcher. Don't wait on me." The sky looked clean. The day looked indifferent. He set out. The land met him with its usual honesty. Past the cottonwoods, he cut west into the low hills. The kind of rises that draw lines on a map and make the word range look less like a noun and more like a sentence. He kept the sun on his left cheek until noon and on his right after, letting it mark his progress with a steady, unargumentative accuracy. The wind worked, not hard but long, flattening the prairie grass in slow, thoughtful strokes. In the burned draw, the ground still smelled faintly of last year's fire, a ghost of resin and smoke. Charred stumps pushed up through the new grass like old memories refusing to quit. He saw no one. A pronghorn watched him from a distance, the insouciant look of an animal who always has a second gear. A red-tailed hawk passed over with the casual disdain of a patrolling sheriff. Clouds built small, then thought better of the project and wandered off to another county. The afternoon slid toward him like a big animal you learned not to fear. He walked. A mile is a different thing on foot. It fills a man's mind with the exact size of the world. You feel the slope no map will bother to mention. You become alert to the small change in the wind that says water is somewhere a little closer than sense would guess. You notice how the soil turns the color of coffee grounds where the creek once braided and then forgot. You count in 2s for the feet and in 4s for the seasons and in 8s for the kinds of luck you believe in. He sang once, a cracked line from an old hymn, and stopped because the land is a church that prefers silence. By dusk, he reached the fence row where the cotton insulators had cracked and fallen. a museum of men's attempts to keep current moving in a straight line. He walked the line for half a mile and then stepped off into the shallow bowl that led toward Owl Canyon. Night took the sky in slow mouthfuls. He made a camp of sorts under a leaning juniper, rolled himself in wool, and let the earth make a bed out of its spine. Coyotes spoke somewhere near, passing gossip along the line of dark. The stars went about their rude, necessary business. He slept as men sleep who have put work on the calendar for morning. He woke when the cold pressed its thumb into his ribs and stepped back into his boots with the practiced acceptance of a man who does not expect comfort as a wage. He chewed jerky that tasted like yesterday, and apples he did not finish. He kept the cores for later, because later is a country you plan for when you intend to arrive. By noon, the canyon opened its rust-colored mouth. Owl Canyon is not a ravine so much as a polite interruption in the land, a place where water has remembered its path and told its story in rock. He dropped into it by the old cattle track and followed the cool seam through stone where even the summer sun has to work to make a living. The air smelled of damp limestone and something green with more confidence than a desert deserves. He found a small pool under a ledge and asked it for a refill. It obliged, and then, at last, the little cabin at the line camp made its square argument against the roundness of the world. A shed leaned beside it, failing in a dignified way. The corrals out back remembered their shapes even in neglect. And there, tied to the juniper post that had served as anchor for more fireside stories than he could count, stood Arrow. The gelding lifted his head and voiced a low sound that was not a whinny so much as a conversation long delayed. He pushed the rope against the post with his cheek, an old habit, a small joke. See, I know knots too. His water was still drinkable in the deep bucket, shaded by the post in the lean of afternoon. The hay had been enough for 2 days, but would not have been for 4. Thomas stepped in close and put his forehead against Arrow's. He stood there, the way a man stands at a grave when he chooses to say the right words for the living. He said nothing. Arrow breathed out and in, slow, and in that exchange the distance that had tried to live between them died a quiet death. You waited, Thomas said into the animal's black forelock. I told you I would come and I came. He checked legs, hooves, skin, the small ledger of wounds a horse carries as proof of a life well spent. A scrape under the cheek where the rope had rubbed. A nick on the hock that had decided not to matter. No swelling, eyes clear. The rope came loose like a forgiving sentence. Arrow walked 2 steps, turned, and put his muzzle in Thomas's hand as if to measure whether it had learned anything since yesterday. He fed him the saved half apple and a promise. A man might risk stupidity for love. He might risk pride.
He does not risk a second axle or the state of a washed-out road.
That left only the old way. They started home on foot. Thomas kept the lead rope loose, just a question mark between them. Arrow followed as if questions were the whole point of the day. Through the canyon, where shade lived even at noon, the horse's breath made little ghosts that broke themselves against the cool. On the long climb up the backside, the gelding's ears flicked at sounds Thomas could not hear, as if he were listening to the newsfeed of the land itself. At the ridge, wind pressed its familiar palm to their chests and held it there just long enough to say, I remember you. Walking beside a horse is a different religion than riding one. The rhythm gets inside your bones in another way. You feel the weight shift and the patient intelligence of 1,000 negotiations a body makes with the ground. Arrow matched Thomas's stride until matching wasn't the point anymore. Until the two of them made a third cadence that belonged to neither. When the sun dropped, they did not stop. When the stars sharpened, they found the right line of fence and followed the posts like numbers in a hymn. They rested once under a cut bank where the wind forgot to look. Arrow stood with one back leg cocked and dozed his small, efficient doze. Thomas closed his eyes, sitting up, learning again that sleep cannot be saved for later, but can be borrowed. They rose and walked. At dawn, the light broke over the eastern flats and turned the land to copper. The ranch was still a long way off, but long ways off become not far when you are already pointed the right direction. Arrow moved easily beside him, the dark coat warming under the new sun, the star on his forehead a pale ember, a lamp to walk by if you were the kind of man who needed a reason. Thomas's feet had begun to raise their own objections, slow aches, then bright ones. But pain is a poor mathematician and cannot count what matters. Near noon, they crested the final rise, and the cottonwoods came into view, their leaves talking a little in the wind like gossip they had been aching to share. The creek shone its thin alphabet in the bed it had learned as a child. Beyond the yard, the barn kept its square-shouldered watch, the sign at the lane catching the light the way a good word catches a man's ear. Arrow pricked his ears and breathed out a bigger breath. That hoarse prayer you do not translate, because translation would be an insult. Thomas touched his neck, a thank you in the language of touch, and felt the heat there. Work, life, yes. They crossed the yard without ceremony. Juniper stuck her head over the stall and informed the universe that punctuality was a virtue. Birdie lifted her chin an inch as if to bless arrivals. Ledger did the arithmetic of the afternoon and forgave the numbers he could not make come out even. Button looked for the pocket that always lied to him and found it told the truth this once. Arrow stepped into his pen and turned, as if to confirm that the man who had walked 50 miles to get him had not evaporated at the gate. Thomas leaned his arms on the top rail and stood there until standing had said what it needed to say. Later, after water and hay and the quiet business of brushing the dust out of a coat that had earned the dust, a pickup rolled in off the road. The neighbor climbed down, hat in his hand, carrying a bag that clinked like glass. "Heard you lit out on foot," the neighbor said. "Fella at the washout told me you were either crazy or trustworthy." "What did you tell him?" Thomas asked. "Told him we don't keep them separate out here." They sat on the porch with bottles sweating into their palms while the afternoon leaned on the world in that lazy way it gets midsummer. The neighbor asked what the line camp looked like these days, and Thomas described the shed's lean and the juniper's grip and the way the wind still used the cabin roof as a drum. He told him nothing about the part where his forehead had rested against his horses, or how a promise kept is a kind of architecture you can live in for a while. Some rooms you do not invite a visitor into, even a friend, not because they are secret, because they are still building themselves. That night, the stars came in close and the coyotes sang about it. The creek forgot its troubles. Thomas made one more circle in the barn, counted the easy breaths, felt every step in his feet like a victory you do not parade. Arrow stood with his head over the gate, half asleep, half awake, the way guardians rest. Thomas placed his hand between the horse's eyes and left it there long enough that the animal could take what it needed from the offering. "You waited," he said again, and this time the words were bigger than 2 days and 50 miles. "And I came." He slept hard and woke sore and did not believe for a second that he had made the wrong trade. In the morning he found the note still pinned to the gate and smiled at the part where he had written, "Don't wait on me." He pulled it loose and put it in the notebook where he kept weather and fence repairs and sentences that had earned the paper they lived on. On the next page he wrote, "The road was gone. The way still was. People in town told the story the way towns do. They said he walked 50 miles and never once thought of turning back. They said the horse heard his steps from a mile away. They said he talked to the animal in the night, and the animal answered. They said the storm that washed out the road had been the worst in 10 years, and the man who walked it had been the kind who didn't bother counting. They told the tale like it was about endurance, and of course it was. But it was about something smaller too, and something larger. It was about how a creature waits because he believes you. It was about how a man goes because he said he would. It was about the old simple arithmetic of the open country, where love is made from promises and feet, and the exact shape of the land between. On the third day after coming home, Thomas led Arrow down to the creek at dusk. The water moved with the lazy pride of a thing that knows it has survived worse. Arrow dipped his muzzle and drank, the ripples widening until the world went back to still, and then he lifted his head and looked toward the ridge as if remembering the way a road disappears when a river decides to become a mouth. Thomas followed the look and let it pass through him. "We'll go back up there," he said, "when the road's honest again. Not because we have to, because it's part of who we are." Arrow flicked an ear and swished his tail at a fly with all the dignity of a prince and none of the vanity. They walked back to the barn through evening light that made the dust look like holy ash. Behind them, the creek whispered what creeks whisper when they are pleased with their own grammar. Ahead of them, the barn door stood open, which is the only way a door like that means a thing. The night arrived cool and steady. The wind forgot its bad habits. Somewhere across the pasture, a small owl practiced saying the name of the dark and getting it right. The world had tried its hand at separation. It had failed. 50 miles is only ever the distance between a promise and its completion.